here's what they don't understand is that podcast and television are mortal enemies because television replaced radio, which is our ancestral Aryan forefathers.
Yeah, video killed the radio star. Everyone knows this.
Exactly. And now radio is back. Is back, you fucking scumbag. Because nobody wants to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine on their telephone. You got to have it on the fucking Roku. And you know what, Liz?
What?
These iHeartRadio bastards, by the way, TrueAnon is an iHeartRadio production. These iHeartRadio bastards have like dozens of TV shows. Of podcasts about TV shows.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Podcasts about TV shows.
Have you ever heard one?
I don't. Isn't there that one that people enjoy about the West Wing?
No. I mean, I don't know. Every time people talk about the West Wing, I'm like, I don't know what you're no one in my life ever watched that.
It's on Netflix if you want. I think.
Why would I want?
I don't know.
What urge would drive me to watch it?
If you decided that you wanted to, understand the mind of Matt Iglesias.
Okay, well, if I want to understand the mind, I've said it a million times. The combination for that, which is chemically proven to work, is to take 200 milligrams of trazodone and drink an entire thing of coffee. That's how you do it. The real man's Ambien. But yeah, no, we got 90210. No, we got.
That's the name of the show. That's the name of the podcast?
No, but I did hear a podcast the other day on the iHeartRadio network where the ad was for a 90210 podcast. It's a television show that came out 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, I guess. This is the thing. This is recap culture.
But how can you recap something that has been capped for so long?
What?
I guess the whole thing about recapping is that you take the cap off and then you sort of swirl it around and then cap it again.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come in. Jeffrey Epstein.
Liz cut me off there, but if you're a comedian in Los Angeles and you are working and it's your fucking job, and I know maybe it's hard to find jobs as a comedian because comedy is it's like one of the lowest things that you can do with your life. If you're a comedian in Los Angeles and you are working on an iHeartRadio television show recap podcast, you should put a 9mm Sig Sauer in your mouth and just think for a while. Just think. Welcome to the show. I'm Brace Belden.
Okay, I'm Liz. Hello. We are, of course, joined by producer Young Chomsky.
You're doing the we of course now. I love it.
Yeah, we like to trade
That's
off.
right.
And guess
We like
what?
to trade off.
This is TrueAnon. Hello.
Hello.
We are, you know what? I think we could do a little graceful entry, graceful landing into the show, but I think we should just get to it because we got a lot to get into. And we are not actually talking about television show recaps as much as I think Brace would like that to go on.
No, we're talking about when Bill
this.
Clinton killed a mentally retarded man named Ricky Ray Rector so he could be elected for the president of the United States. Just kidding. We're not talking about that either.
That did happen, though.
That did happen, yes.
Of course.
No, we're talking about something that is bad.
Great intro.
Wait, no. Hold on. Let me clarify. That was also bad. We're just talking about... Okay, maybe a little, we did not nail the smooth landing there. That's the murder. Yeah, he shouldn't have done that either. We're talking about Blackwater.
Yeah, okay. So the reason Brace mentioned pardons is because very recently, former president, as he's been recently deposed, former President Trump pardoned 4 Blackwater guards for their roles in what has... I mean, if you guys aren't aware, but it's like pretty famous. It's called the Nisour Square Massacre. It was 4 guys: Nicholas Slatton, Paul Slough.
Hate that name.
Slough.
Morrowind.
I don't know what you're supposed to. Paul, Dustin Hurd, and Evan Liberty. Now, look. These are real people.
Evan Liberty.
Yeah, these are real people, and I gotta say, the most crisis actor names I've ever heard in my entire life.
These are so fucking fake. I know, absolutely. This is
Slatin.
like Slatin. This
You
is
can't even
come
say
on.
the second guy's name.
Paul Sloff. I think we're going with Sloff here.
Yeah. Anyway, so Trump pardoned these guys, which is really fucking insane.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has. I mean, it's not. It's like Trump has long basically maintained that it's okay to kill civilians or whatever. I mean, that to be clear, every American government has been 100% okay with killing civilians. Trump had just kind of come out and said it. Like, you kill someone. There was a case of Eddie Gallagher, who I think was a SEAL. I'm getting SEAL sense from him due to my hatred of him, who, slit the throat of a, I believe, Iraqi child who he said was in who was in ISIS, who was wounded. They were tending to him, and he comes over and slits the guy's throat. Eddie Gallagher is like a total fucking freak. Of course, now has like a clothing line and like a popular Instagram and stuff like that.
Smashing watermelons on every stage across America.
Exactly. Huge entertainment career. But the Blackwater Guards were really, I mean, this has been a case that has been, I mean, the Nisour Square massacre happened in 2007, and this has always been kind of one of those things where it was like, these are, not U.S. troops. There's no they had a lot of people pushing basically for their release, but there wasn't that same sort of impetus, I didn't think.
Yeah, I mean, this was like this was marked kind of the big turn in popular opinion, although it should be said the Iraq War was never quite that popular, but comparable to other wars in the past. But it really marked a turn in public opinion on the Iraq War, and specifically with DoD and their relationship with private military contractors, which we're going to get into. So we should say, in case anyone we're going to get into more details about actually the event that happened, but we should say, these four guys, there's actually, maybe five. One of them actually ratted on the other four, and they also prosecuted him, which is pretty funny.
My man.
Yeah.
Start snitching.
Yeah, snitching doesn't pay, folks. Just remember that.
Actually, literally does.
Well, that guy went to jail.
I know, but in my experience, people will pay you to snitch. So just saying that.
So these guys, they killed 17 unarmed civilians as kind of hired Blackwater personal security detail in Iraq in 2007. 20 more were wounded. So like a total of about 37 people shot, a shit ton of kids, which we're going to talk about. But so recently, like Bryce said, like ever since the incident in 2007, there's been a kind of like, a section of the right wing kind of DoD Bush guy cheerleaders who were always pushing for these guys to get off, and to pardon them. It ended up being a pretty long and storied trial, which again we will get into. But prior to Trump's pardon, there was a big push, like a really big push, to get these guys' sentences vacated. And that's kind of what set all of this in motion. So there's this guy, John N. Marr, as in Bill Maher, very similar, of Marr Legal Services, the Bon Jovi of legal services, who he drafted like a 60-page habeas corpus motion to call on the courts to vacate, set aside, or free the four Blackwater Guards, so they could go home to their family. He cited a bunch of Brady violations, which basically refers to when prosecutors fail to turn over exculpatory evidence. This guy Marr, by the way, I just want to note, he was a former JAG officer in Afghanistan.
Oof.
Yeah.
Considering the high quality of human being that have come out of the JAG Corps, including Kurt Schlichter, really the whole thing should be abolished and they should be in prison.
And including the television show JAG.
Never heard of it. However, I will be appearing on JAG On, which is a iHeartRadio Network show, and it is a weekly recap of the television show JAG.
Wouldn't it be called Jag Off?
No, well, the joke is that people think it's going to be called Jag Off, but we're jagging on because we're on TV. Well,
anyway, so this guy, he also was a federal prosecutor. He was actually, funny enough, appointed by George W. Bush. So,
Classic.
all up in the family. He later went on to work for the DIA. And I just want to mention him because he also runs a website and this is literally what it's called. It's called lawyersdefendingwarriors.com.
There's no difference between a lawyer and a warrior.
That's what I've always said, baby.
Both
but-
meets in fields of combat. Both generally, I would say, people don't like. And you know what? Here's the thing. You're in jail. You're going to call one or the other, a warrior or a lawyer, to defend you.
So, anyway, that's kind of how this all got in motion. Let's get into the pardon really quick. So, do you want to read from this? I don't know how else to do this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I cut out a paragraph here that just says a bunch of bullshit. I mean, the whole thing's a bunch of bullshit. But I do want to mention some of the elected officials that were shouted out here. So today, President Trump granted full pardons to Nicholas Slatton, Paul Sloff, Evan Liberty, and Dustin Hurd. The pardon of these 4 veterans is broadly supported by the public. Not a citation on that. Including Pete. So they're just including Pete Hegseth. And elected officials such as Representative Louis Gohmert, Representative Paul Gosar, Representative Ralph Norman, and these are all representatives, so I'm just going to say their names. Bill Flores, Brian Babin, Michael Burgess, Daniel Webster, Steve King, and Ted Yoho.
It's funny. It reads kind of like, especially with the Pete Hegseth thing, it like reads like, a college when it gets donations for an auditorium or whatever. And it's like, thank you. Special thank you to Pete Hegseth.
I mean, this has been, a lot of these guys appear on Fox News like over and over and over, really pushing for these guys' release. So they must be pretty, gratified to see their names here. So these veterans were working in Iraq in 2007 as security contractors responsible for securing the safety of United States personnel. When the convoy attempted to establish a blockade outside the, quote, green zone, the situation turned violent, which is a classic use of the passive voice there. Which
Hate when my
in,
situations turn violent.
I really don't like that. Who did it? Who knows? Which resulted in the unfortunate deaths and injuries of Iraqi civilians.
Unfortunate.
Initial charges against the men were dismissed, but they were eventually tried and convicted on charges ranging from first-degree murder to voluntary manslaughter.
It's not that large of a range, by the way.
Yeah, there's really just 2 charges, basically, that they were hit with, the murder and then the manslaughter. On appeal, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that additional evidence should have been presented at Mr. Slatton's trial. Further, prosecutors recently disclosed, this part really gets me, more than 10 years after the incident, that the lead Iraqi investigator, who prosecutors relied heavily on to verify that there were no insurgent victims and to collect evidence, may have had ties to insurgent groups himself. By the way, I want to make it clear in case that's not true. Like, they just made that up.
Yeah, I'd really like to know the definition of insurgent. That's kind of key.
But also much of these guys, I mean, we'll get to the trial later, but these guys were basically convicted on testimony from the dozens of people that saw them open fire on just random people in a street. And then the FBI team, which found that they received absolutely 0 fire from any source besides themselves.
Yeah. So in order to properly tell this story, we need to back up a bit. We should go through the details of what actually happened in Nisour Square before we kind of get into a bit of a history here with Blackwater and the Iraq War, because you got to get some context here to fully understand the gravity of this situation and the pardon itself. So this incident happened September 16th, 2007, in Baghdad. This is in a kind of fancy area, right? Brace, you're you're our Middle East correspondent here at True 9.
I've never been to Baghdad, but it's Mansour Square. Mansour District. From what I understand, it's a little bit fancier, although I have a feeling probably not that fancy. But it's a real hot day, and it gets hot out there,
Yeah.
Apparently, a car bomb had exploded by a mosque about a mile away from Nisour Square, while a State Department delegation was at some compound somewhere nearby. And so after the bomb explodes, I think when things like that tend to happen there, it was kind of if you're not in the green zone, you got to get back to the green zone.
Can you explain what the green zone is?
I would love to. One time when I was on methamphetamine, I read a book called Imperial Life in the Emerald City, I believe it's called. I can't remember who wrote it, but I read it in 1 hour about life in the green zone. And believe me, the green zone was a giant area kind of in the middle of Baghdad that was the American sector, right? Everything in there was American, really, really, really strict security. I mean, it was all holds bars, anything kind of goes.
You want your
for
blue
Americans.
jeans and your Coca-Cola?
Absolutely.
Come hang out at the green zone.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is with Americans, as we'll get into with the contracting stuff, Blue Jeans and Coca-Cola are like, if you go to another country as an American, you are believe me, you are living in a little America. Never feel bad for soldiers being like, oh, it's so hard for me. Motherfucker, you were eating Burger King in Kuwait and fucking Iraq. Suck my fucking dick. When you have to eat fucking plain rice or nothing at all for like 3 weeks like I did, then we can talk. You know how hungry I was? And anyways, so they, you know, they have to evacuate these, you know, State Department fucking lackeys, you know, pieces of shit back to the green zone. While this is happening, there's a group called
Raven 23.
at a nearby Blackwater base, and in the green zone, and they request permission to leave the green zone and clear a route for the caravan. The request is denied, but the convoy leaves anyways, which is very indicative of what our friends in Blackwater like to do. I will say there is an important detail at this point. The cameras, you know, sort of at the entrance to the green zone, show these vehicles leaving, these 4 vehicles leaving. They are painted silver. Not so the case later in this story.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, anyways, the caravan heads to Nassour Square to basically clear a route for the State Department types. And Nassour Square is like a giant traffic circle. There are a lot of these all over the Middle East. In fact, there's traffic circles like everywhere but San Francisco. But it's a large traffic circle, and that's kind of where things go south. So the way that like convoys work in Iraq is, I mean, it's similar and different between like Blackwater convoys and American and troop convoys. The thing is though, Blackwater convoys are literally just allowed to shoot at whoever they want. Like if your car gets too close to their car, they'll kill you. And in fact, there were like tons of incidents of them doing this, sometimes in front of State Department functionaries.
Yeah.
They would just like, someone would veer too close to them and they would just blast them and be like, oh, that's it. And no one gets in trouble.
Yeah, and the thing too, like to mention, well, I guess we'll get into this a bit more later, but with Blackwater, they were tasked with, you know, basically providing security, which is a very broad term, but so they would say that they were acting, you know, someone was attacking not them but the client, the people they were protecting, and so they would use that as a justification to basically shoot up anyone they wanted, not just on foreign soil, as we'll also talk about.
Yes. Yeah, and in fact Blackwater had killed just a ton of people, not even in caravans. Like, you know, at one point a sniper shot just 3 Iraqi security guards at a TV station for what seems like fun. And none of those families ever got any sort of compensation or anything from the American government, although, as we'll see in the Nassour Square case, many of those families would refuse that kind of stuff anyways. They get to Nassour Square, and these guys are not just like in SUVs. They are in, from what I can understand, although I've read a couple of different, sometimes it says they're in Bearcats, sometimes it says they're in Mamba APCs, but they are basically in APCs, you know, big armored ass vehicles, mine protected. They have 7.62 millimeter guns on top, and I believe they also have grenade launchers on them. And grenade launchers are, I've never shot a grenade launcher, I've never, you know, been around a grenade launcher. I actually have seen a grenade launcher for sale in a weapon store in Syria, but it was not like a mounted one. But yeah, they can cause a lot of havoc.
These vehicles are puffed.
Yeah. They are big ass fucking vehicles.
Yeah, big boys.
And the thing is, like, when Blackwater convoys, or really American convoys, any sort of, you know, foreign convoys are going around Iraq, they don't like call the traffic cops ahead of time. And in the Middle East, there's quite a lot of like white gloved traffic policemen, you know, because they don't have lights everywhere, and you know, things can be a little chaotic. They need them to direct people. And so, like, if you're a traffic cop and you see these convoys coming, you want to, like, it's your job. You got to fucking scramble to get everybody out of the way, because these people can shoot them with no impunity. Precisely what happens here. Once they're in the Nassour Square area, a sniper attached to the team, who we will talk about later. Actually, I'll mention his name now. A man named Nicholas Slatton puts his fucking gun out of one of these sort of slats, like they have these little, the openings in the sides of the vehicles, and just immediately shoots the driver of a white Kia. Like, just kills him. The driver collapses sort of on the steering wheel, and the car starts slowly rolling forward. The woman in the passenger seat is flipping out because the person next to her was just shot randomly out of the side of a truck. 2 Iraqi traffic cops like try to stop the car from moving because it's like moving towards the APCs. At this point, the Blackwater mercenaries claim that they think the Kia, in fact, they don't even claim they think, they're like, yeah, that Kia was a car bomb. That was a vehicle-borne IED, VBID. I just call them car bombs because whenever you try to use like military terminology,
I hate when people do that.
I do too. Like people were like, especially people who say it like, ROE, rules of engagement. Like
you sound like a fucking mercenary when you talk like that.
Exactly. Just I mean,
normal.
rules of engagement, it makes sense. But like, yeah, like this stuff, like VBID, like, okay, car bombs are different, but like, you know what I mean in this case. It's a car bomb. It's a bomb. It's a car that's made into a bomb.
Talk to people normally.
Exactly. So they're like, oh shit, this thing's a car bomb because the guy we just killed no longer can put his foot on the brake because he's dead because we shot him, and it's rolling towards us. And then they fucking open fire on it again and kill the woman in the passenger seat. According to the FBI agent in charge of the investigation, they also hit it with a grenade. They also discovered that they shot it dozens of times with illegal black-tipped armor-piercing ammunition, which Blackwater was not allowed to have there. Basically, a lot of the guns they had, I don't think they were allowed to have the grenade launchers or like anything, but again, it's cowboy shit. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, they were doing, another thing to know about Blackwater is that, and we probably don't have enough time to even get into all this, but they were also doing a lot of weapons movement throughout the Middle East because mercenaries are, they're for hire, right? And so depending on who wants to hire them, that's what they're there for.
Exactly. That's the thing is they provide, let's say, full spectrum services to whatever client they'd like. I mean, it's the massacre. Again, I can't get into it point by point because it's really a little too brutal, and also that there are so many bodies at the end of this. But one I think is really indicative and heartbreaking. It's a family in a taxi cab try to lie down. They take fire. And one child, a 9-year-old named Ali, slumps into his father's arms. His dad sort of tries to put his kid's head up. The door is open, and the kid's brains just fucking fall onto the sidewalk because he got shot by an American mercenary. A car carrying ice was hit. One of the workers was shot. Tries to get out, tries to escape, and when he opens the car door to get out, the car door and I think the guy are blown away by a grenade launched from one of the Blackwater vehicles. Again, the traffic cops claim these guys were just shooting randomly. I mean, and that really seems to be the case, is that just like anyone and everything, they're just shot at them. And people tried to flee because, generally when there's firing, no matter even if you're on the insurgent side or whatever, and by the way, there were no insurgents, and also, by the way, the insurgents were right. You try to fucking take off from there, you don't want to get shot by anybody. And they shot people in the back. They shot people driving away. I mean, they just shot everybody. 0 incoming fire. I want to make that very clear. There were 0 shots fired at the block. I mean, not that would have excused what they did anyways, but like to be clear, there was not like the fucking president's press release says there wasn't violence occurring. Like there was violence inflicted by one party, the Blackwater team. They massacred 20 people, shot 17 more people, and then just roll back to base.
Yeah. So after this, like I said, this became a huge, just a huge sensation. Like obviously not just in Iraq, but also like in America. Immediately, the Iraqi government like puts out a release that is like, Blackwater did this. This was a total massacre. What the fuck? Because they've been having, you have to understand that like. What's kind of a provisional government at this time, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. is still very much in control, but, it's more complicated. They had been having a shit ton of problems with Blackwater because these guys, as we'll get into, they, like you said, they're operating with like with total impunity. So they can they're just like running around like they own the place. And Iraq really wants to get them out. And so this is like a huge a huge fucking deal. And rightfully, they seize on it and are like, try to get ahead of the story. Blackwater puts out a press release, or their guys come out and they're like, no, 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 no. It was insurgents, it was car bombs, all the things that Brace was outlining. What's fucking crazy is that then, so the media is like reporting both of this stuff that's happening. Then the State Department, they issue a statement, and this is like official, unofficial State Department, like, I don't know, digital stationery, because they send it to all the media outlets, right? The State Department issues a statement saying that Blackwater troops were ambushed defending American lives in a war zone. This is on like the full official letterhead. This is like totally, this is allegedly the official statement by the US government, right? Turns out this statement was written by a Blackwater operative named Darren Hanner. And it was put forward as the official State Department statement on the incident.
Insane. Like that is what is so wild to me. Like it's the State Department's relationship with Blackwater is really funny, because basically like the State Department was guarded almost at all times when in Iraq by Blackwater guards.
Yeah.
And so they have this really weird relationship with them where they, I mean, again, corrupt and fucked up, but like they can't get rid of Blackwater, and they can't really afford to piss them off too much, because these are the guys that are protecting like the tons of State Department employees that are in Iraq at that moment that they're putting out any sort of press release.
It's a fucking mafia relationship.
Totally. I mean, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, like Liz mentioned, the Iraqi government really wanted them out because I didn't mention this earlier, but a Blackwater guard had drunkenly just murdered a member of the vice president's security squad who like asked him to leave like the vice president's zone. He just shot him, and then they gave, I think they gave his family $5,000 because they didn't want to make it too high. As the U.S. government said, if they did make it too high, originally it was supposed to give them $250K. If they made it $250,000, then people would kill themselves so their family could get that money. So they lowballed everyone. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible. At one point, this actually happened before the Nisour Square shootings. State Department was making some sort of preliminary investigations on Blackwater, and one of the heads, or I believe actually the head of Blackwater in Iraq, went up to the State Department investigator. And this is in like, there are congressional documents that show that this happened. He said, he said he would and could kill him and get away with it because it's Iraq. So he like literally was like, I'll shoot you and nothing will happen to me because it's Iraq, which that is really sort of a theme of a lot of this.
And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. Like if he had shot him, then he probably would have gotten away with it. That's the thing is, if you're U.S. troops killed countless civilians in Iraq, but like in a situation like this, you might get in some trouble. There is at least a chance that you'll get in some trouble. Granted, you'll probably be given clemency in not too distant future, but at least you might get kicked out of the army. In the case of Blackwater guards, they're like, yeah, we will never let people be prosecuted in Iraq or really even in America. And like they'll smuggle anybody out of country immediately if they're involved in anything like this.
Well, that's what these guys, in the Nisour Square massacre, that's what these like 17 Blackwater guards were under the impression, because when basically the State Department shows up, they roll through and they question these guys like immediately afterwards. And the State Department goes, don't worry, we're giving you limited use immunity. So nothing you say can be used against you in a court of law. And like these guys like say all this shit. This becomes a real problem for the DOJ when they're trying to prosecute this case, which we can get into. But I do want to mention that this is also how Oliver North got off.
Yes, absolutely.
Limited use immunity.
Well, the FBI rolls out there too 2 weeks after it happens, and you know why? It's because they were originally supposed to be guarded by Blackwater guards. And so they received a lot of pushback from that, and eventually had to bring their own security guards, which I believe, no disrespect to Blackwater, I feel like the FBI can probably handle itself. I think they have a lot of machine guns and stuff like that. Well, these investigators get there, and bam, they notice that, okay, all of the trucks have been repainted. All of the so-called like damage they took has been fixed. Eventually, they tracked down like one part of an engine that they said had been fucked up and went through it. And wouldn't you know it, it had been damaged by a grenade fired from a grenade launcher on a Blackwater vehicle. In fact, all of the damage they found, 100% of the damage that they found had been caused by Blackwater-friendly fire.
So I think, like, we've talked a little bit about, or, tried to impress some people, like, the total insanity of the Blackwater era. I think some of our listeners who maybe are a bit older, like, will remember this because Blackwater really became, like, kind of a, like, catch-all for all of the heinous crimes of the Bush administration in Iraq. It kind of became, like, kind of a, like a symbol of that. But, like, the PMC relationship with DOD and Blackwater really is just one of many, but it is a huge one, and it certainly was a huge one in Iraq. Like, this relationship goes back further. This wasn't the first time, and in order to kind of understand that relationship, we really do have to kind of roll back a little bit to my favorite time in American history. September 11th.
Incredible. Well, in fact, a lot of people talk about September 11th, this tragedy, but no one really talks about September 12th, where we all came together, or September 10th.
Well, September 10th, yeah.
Yes.
September 10th and September 12th were big days for, if you worked in private military contracting, big days for you. Because,
or an Israeli moving company, yeah.
Yeah. So September 10th, 2001, a lot of people have forgotten this, but this, this happened, and it's a bit much. It's a bit on the nose, we'll say, particularly if you've listened to our series on September 11th.
Liz, we actually won't be saying that because I just said the Israeli moving company.
So literally the day before September 11th, okay? Rumsfeld, that guy, Donnie R., Donnie Rums, he's in front of the Pentagon. Remember, he is the Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush. And basically, he gives this huge speech. All these Pentagon officials are in front of him, bunch of bureaucrats, bunch of guys that handle all the contracts with, like, Northrop Grumman, Halliburton, all those, whatever, all the big contracting companies. And he says, the security of the United States of America is facing a new adversary. It's the last passion of 5-year planning. This adversary sounds like the Soviet Union, but our foes are more subtle and implacable today. The adversary is the Pentagon bureaucracy. I think he thought that was like him being funny. I don't know. It's not very funny.
That is kind of funny.
Yeah. Oops, got him.
Yeah. Oh, whoa, he called us communists.
So, yeah, basically,
Killed
Rumsfeld...
way more people.
Yeah, so basically Rumsfeld announces the day before 9/11 that he is going to war with DOD, and there's going to be, like, a massive, massive shift toward the private sector and contracting. Interesting.
He won that war, though.
Yeah.
You got to give the guy credit. He won the war.
Yeah. And, to understand this, again, this is stuff that we really tried to focus on with Ben in our 9/11 series. Like, all of this is a realization of, like, the core of the Bush administration. Big guy in that core, obviously, is Dick Cheney.
Tricky Dick.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I had to say that.
Well, no, I mean, Cheney was Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
Don't forget,
Correct.
He was Secretary of Defense under Daddy Bush, Papa Bush. Mm-hmm. And when he was there, he was, like, really obsessed with privatizing the military. I mean, this was, like, a really big push. Don't forget that then Cheney, he goes on to become the CEO of Halliburton. He also, there's a time where he works at AEI. I don't know why I just couldn't say
American
that.
Enterprise Institute?
Yeah, so that's like, the big neocon outfit. They're all pushing crazy privatization, crazy wars everywhere. Of course, we cannot forget PNAC. Mm-hmm. So right before Cheney leaves leaves his post as Secretary of Defense. It's like 1992, 1991. He commissions a study by Halliburton on, what is the quickest way for us to privatize the DoD, right? And what they find is that, the quickest way is for the U.S. to expand its skirmishes, we'll say, overseas.
Ooh.
To the point where, they need more and more, personnel that they can't fulfill, and so they need to contract it out, right? So effectively what Cheney commissioned, and then, when he joins Halliburton, what he realizes is that you create an industry for yourself. Because as the U.S. expands its military reach, the more Halliburton gets, the more other private firms can expand all of their business. And this, the reason why we have to kind of set the stage, because Erik Prince emerges directly out of this, as we'll get to, because Blackwater really was nothing until the Iraq War happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and these companies have been around for a while, right? Or PMC companies have been around for a while. Obviously, there are mercenaries dating back to, time immemorial, but really the modern incarnation of this stuff happened, sort of with World War II veterans during the Cold War. They started Executive Outcomes, Sandline International, a lot of, let's say, less than above board work in Africa and Asia and all the same places that it's happening today. But this is really when it becomes a huge industry, because we're not just talking about private military contractors, although these things sort of become inseparable as time goes on, but just contracting in general. I mean, at one point, there were 200 private contracting companies, armed and unarmed, in Iraq. 200 companies. That's incredible. They had this program called, which we could do a whole just podcast about this, called Cost Plus. Basically,
not where you buy shitty,
yes,
first apartment furniture, by the way.
No, this is made
of that wood that's not a real wood.
Yes, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But it's fake wood.
I'll tell you, they make apartment floors out of that these days. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's balsa wood. Anyway,
yeah, awful.
Sorry.
But they got these fucking the way that this program works is, I'll explain it with a little bit of an anecdote. If you, for instance, have a truck, a $100,000, $80,000 truck that you are being contracted to, move something in Iraq or from Kuwait to Iraq, whatever, and that truck gets a flat tire, your company doesn't have spare tires. Your company blows up the truck and makes more money by buying a new truck, because the more you spend, the more you make, which is exactly my theory of financial planning. So this works. I was a big fan of this program and pushed for it really hard when I was in
it's very Keynesian.
Oh, it's incredible. But basically none of these companies, including the big guys like Halliburton, really had any interest in looking out for anything but their bottom line. And, obviously Iraqi lives come at the bottom of that list, but even U.S. troops really got the shaft from these guys. A lot of the time they would just send out convoys, because they were contracted to okay, you have to do this many convoys a day, blah, blah, blah. And so they would just send out convoys with nothing in them to just drive down Iraqi highways from base to base, because that's what they were contracted to do, and they made more money that way. I mean, every executive had I'm talking about 2004 fucking money, $50,000 SUV in Kuwait and stuff like that. I mean, they had Sea-Doos, all this stuff, and they made a ton of money on all of it. They also had a ton of translators that they were just hire without any qualifications. If you spoke anything like broken Arabic or broken English, whatever, and you just called, I think the company was called Thor, you called them and you had a 1-minute phone interview, and then they'd send you to Iraq.
I feel like I remember that.
It's so, yeah, it's amazing.
A huge boom. Yeah, I mean, to really set in the scope of what Cheney and Rumsfeld achieved. During the Gulf War, right? And that's when Cheney was Secretary of Defense, right? So during the Gulf War, the ratio of private military contractors to DoD, officials, personnel, whatever you want to call it, in the Gulf War was 1 to 10. At the end of Rumsfeld's tenure during the Iraq War, it was 1 to 1.
That's like a Belden party.
No, I mean, it's just like really, really, it's like truly
Great ratio.
unprecedented what they achieved. They completely transformed modern warfare. And I do want to get into this. There's ramifications that I think they didn't, foresee, but that come out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, there were so many advantages for them at the time. And for instance, instead of having to have a soldier or somebody, clean a dish, they would actually just hire a guy from Pakistan and pay him $1.25 an hour, make him work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, take his passport, and keep him locked up in a barracks that he can never leave. And these companies would make hundreds of millions of dollars in a contract, while the actual person in Iraq is making $1.25 a day. At one point, this American private military contractor company hired I think something like 1,300 Ugandan, soldiers or security guards to service base security for some places. These guys were paid $3 an hour, and the company that hired them was paid tens and tens of millions of dollars by the Pentagon. And so the whole thing's just a giant scam. And the thing is, the other positive, and the thing that the Pentagon liked too, is if any of these third world nationals died, because that's what they called them. They called them third country nationals, but I guess people called them third world nationals there. They weren't added to the American body count. PMCs weren't either, but they weren't even reported, right?
Yeah.
And so tons of these people died because they were sent, with basically zero instructions to do, maybe drive a truck somewhere or whatever, can't speak the language, and they get killed because they're in a war zone, whether they're killed by Americans or they're killed by, insurgents, whatever, they get killed and nothing happens.
Yeah. Jeremy Scahill in his reporting at the time, but he's also, he's written a book or maybe 2 books on Blackwater, and he's obviously followed Erik Prince and his career very closely through his journalistic career. But he had a great line where he pulled this from the Times of London in 2007 or something. They said the war business boom isn't oil, it's security. And I think people don't totally realize that when they look back and think about the war in Iraq. But this was like we said, this completely transformed everything, including Blackwater, right?
Yeah.
Because Blackwater, before the Iraq War, they were making $300K? They were nothing.
Yeah. Peanut money. I mean, give me a break. I mean, that's the thing. It's what you said is absolutely true, or that quote rather is absolutely true. In San Francisco, there's sort of that old adage, I don't know. Adage, whatever. Adage, the magazine I write for. They have that whole, saying rather, that the people who actually made a ton of money during the gold rush weren't the fucking morons who went to go get gold. It was the people who sold them shovels. And
absolutely.
That's precisely the same thing that's going on here.
Yeah. By 2007, Blackwater is making about $800 million.
Yeah. I think in total they made $1.5 billion.
Just incredible. I mean, fucking incredible. There's, Erik Prince had his autobiography, Civilian Warriors.
Yeah.
He said Blackwater became something resembling its own branch of the military and other government agencies. We became the ultimate tool in the war on terror.
The ultimate tool? Wouldn't that be the Predator drone?
Well, they were the ones running the Predator drones, I guess. So.
I mean, they were fixing them up, but yeah, the crazy thing is that Blackwater really underreported the amount of shootings that they had. A guy, they claimed that they had 1.4 shootings a week. A guy who worked for Blackwater, a whistleblower, said that they had 4 or 5, a week, basically one a day. Or not one a day, but, half of one a day. And, of course, I'm sure a lot of those shootings were for civilians. So, yeah, I mean, before Iraq, Blackwater's business was occasionally training Navy SEALs, because Prince himself had been a Navy SEAL. And then the USS Cole bombing happened. And they suddenly got a huge contract to train U.S. naval personnel on, like, I think how to repel borders and stuff like that, or security. Also, the USS Liberty attack happened, and then they got training to
send emails and write Facebook posts.
Exactly.
No, like I mentioned though, to bring it back, Blackwater. So Blackwater becomes this like catch-all phrase for all the like private military contractors. But it is true that, I mean, they expanded like nuts. Like it wasn't just that overnight. Then suddenly they were doing all this like legit stuff. They were doing like they had a blimp division, which like what?
It's BBW, Blackwater Blimp Works.
No. So they're
that would have
just
been
like,
better if blimps for Blackwater. Whatever. You can't win them all.
well, they're just pulling the federal money and just like spend, creating like crazy. Because the thing is that like, I don't know if people remember, but the Iraqi occupation, not going so well.
No, it was not, Liz. In fact, I would say it was going poorly.
Yeah. And so Blackwater really had an opportunity here to offer its security services because, so much was falling through the cracks over in Iraq.
And the thing is with contractors, and that's the thing, like that sort of is the theme for this, is that contractors can do whatever the fuck they want. They are not under the military code of justice. They are not under they're under these sort of occasionally very vague orders, and they are in their sort of minds, and I mean I guess in reality too, more flexible than U.S. troops. They don't have to call in all these different things. They have different resources. Obviously, they don't have like the same resources as like Army troops or Marines or anything like that. But there's certainly a lot less bureaucracy.
So in order to understand completely like how these guys were running around, you have to understand like a little thing called Order 17. I'm sure that a lot of our listeners have listened, and if they haven't, they should. The excellent series Blowback by friend of the pod Noah Colwyn and Brendan. I can't remember Brendan's last name.
It's James.
Thank you. We're just going to leave that in because I think it's funny.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's
Brendan,
all right.
I forgot your last name. Anyway, you should
Belden.
listen to that show. They do a great job of breaking down a lot of storylines in the Iraq War, and there are a lot. But Order 17 is really key for understanding just how lawless this entire fucking fiasco was.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the work of a guy named Paul Bremer, who is one of the greatest heroes in American history, a real diplomat, and honestly, somebody who I wish was my father.
Oh my god.
A little background on him: he was basically like God in Iraq. He was the like the head of the provisional authority there. He was also a former employee of Kissinger and Associates and had an office in the Twin Towers. He did not go to work the day that the planes hit. Also worked on terrorism legislation under Dennis Hastert, which is the famous pedophile.
Yeah.
Anyways, his ass gets into
that guy
Iraq
was
in
speed
2003. Yes, absolutely. He gets in there. He's basically in Iraq for about a year and a couple months. May 2003 to, or I guess a month, May 2003 to June 2004. Immediately, like one of his first things he does, and this is a very, famous thing that the Americans did, which was seen as a mistake, although maybe not. They fire like every single government official and soldier, the entire officer corps, because this is a process known as de-Baathification. Obviously, a throwback to denazification.
That's so funny.
But the thing is, like, they do kind of the same thing because in denazification, they basically like, okay, you're a postal official. Now you can't have a job for a year or whatever until you've completed some courses. And then if you're a higher ranking one, now we're going to hire you to start the spy service, and you don't have to denazify. Or in fact, you can actually become the leader of Bolivia and sell cocaine in a couple decades, so don't worry about it. In the case of Klaus Barbie, but they banned basically all these guys from having jobs. I mean, I think they put like 500,000 people out of work. He's obsessed, and this is Americans get really into sects when they're talking about Iraq. They're like, I mean, obviously everyone knows about that big plan to turn it into like a Sunnistan, a Shiistan, and a Kurdistan,
Right.
But like this is all kind of governing their thinking. He's like, fuck Sunnis. And this is a very funny kind of reversal of how things often sometimes work with them too. It's like, fuck Sunnis, it's more reliable. Shias are more reliable, even though, not that this matters. I think there was more Shia in the Ba'ath Party than there were Sunni. Again, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but he like constantly compared like Ba'athists to Hitler. He claimed Hussein killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqis in the 90s, which is not true, even though that claim is, reported constantly over and over and over again. And of course, like I said before, created the Green Zone, the Emerald City. So right before he leaves...
He really is like the Wizard of Oz of the Green Zone.
Absolutely. Just a real... I can't remember what happens in the Wizard of Oz, but he is really... he kicks John Wick's ass.
Have you seen the Wizard of Oz?
No, it's like a John Wick thing.
Oh my god.
So he
anyway,
I just assume that most movies are in the John Wick universe.
I think that's a fair assumption.
I haven't seen those either, but they seem very popular, and I can understand the connection between other movies now. Anyways, so and basically he signs this thing called Order 17, which it is a long thing to read, and we're not going to read in fact any of it because it's just legal mumbo jumbo. But the essence of it, in fact, the entirety of it is saying foreign contractors connected to the occupation of the country are 100% totally immune from Iraqi law.
Yeah.
So, like, I can go up to you. I am, say, a member of Blackwater. I can go up to you on the street, put a gun to your head, and pull the trigger and kill you in front of as many people as I want. And the Iraqis legally can do nothing about it. It's insane.
Yeah. Yes. So foreigners were to be completely immune from any form of arrest or detention other than persons acting on behalf of the sending states. So AKA America.
Yeah. By the way, that doesn't apply to if you're a member of a neighboring country that is in Iraq.
Right.
Just Americans.
Right. And also we should mention that Americans had complete and total utter freedom to arrest and detain indefinitely whoever they wanted.
I seem to remember there was a famous prison somewhere in Iraq.
Yeah, they also got some interesting immunity deals.
Yes. Also, contractors involved in that, too.
Yeah.
None of whom ever got punished, even though they were directly involved in the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib.
Yeah. So this was also, I don't know if people, I mentioned this in the last episode. We were talking about the telecoms, but this was like during a period where like everyone was getting immunity. It was like, this is
literally the period where Epstein got immunity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Everyone was immunity crazed.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Beanie Baby of the late 2010s or
You're like a
2008s.
Beverly Hills mother
that
giving
joke
a
because
kid
I couldn't fucking
measles.
remember the date.
Beanie
wasn't a
Babies
great
are
joke.
they're still around.
Anyway, so no, everyone's getting immunity. So, the Bush administration is like, they knew they were fucking legally, they could be liable for a lot of shit, including, by the way, going to The Hague. And so they're just handing out immunity. They give the telecoms immunity. They give CIA immunity. They give contractors immunity. They're just giving everyone immunity. And this is a big fucking deal to the incoming, or, there's supposed to be this handoff, basically, to an incoming Iraqi government, right? And
Yeah.
Nisour Square, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, becomes this catalyst, in Iraq as much as it does in America. So, this is a huge scandal. There's the trial that they hold in America for this is fucking nuts. It basically lasts 11 years.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you're on trial, you kind of want that to happen.
It starts the first trial. So, okay, We're gonna have to. There's a lot of details in here, especially details the right wing really likes to cling to. I don't know. It's a little much for me, but basically, there's 3 different trials. There's the first case that DOJ brings against these guys is dismissed in December of 2009, and I gotta say, Eric Holder, not a great attorney general.
No,
he fucked up a lot of
Bad
cases.
AG.
This was a big case that he fucked up. And there was a lot of pressure on the Obama admin, and also we should say Hillary Clinton, State Department, to really like do something about this. Not just from the U.S. media, because at this time, right? Okay, little history lesson. Obama, Hillary, they run against each other in the primary, right?
Wait, for president?
Technically for the Democratic nomination for president.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Former adversaries, then stronger together. But yeah, so they run against Blackwater is actually a big touchstone of their respective campaigns, and Hillary goes like ham against it and is like, we're getting rid of all of the contracts, these guys are going to go to jail. It's like a big rallying thing. Obama famously says that he's gonna shut down Guantanamo. That doesn't happen. He's gonna, we're getting out of the Iraq War. That doesn't happen. All these things he says he's gonna do.
We have Hillary Clinton with her Huma Abedin, who's literally a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Like, we're making progress here.
So when Obama presidency starts and Hillary Clinton's in there. By the way, we should say that Hillary did actually follow through. The Hillary Clinton State Department totally fucking nuked all Blackwater contracts.
Yes, which plays an important role in our story later.
Yeah, in the kind of in the metamorphosis of one Eric Prince,
The Jokerine.
But yeah, so the Holder DOJ like really fucked this up. The first case is dismissed. There's a 90-page opinion. 90 pages in a
What is this guy, a woman?
No, Judge Ricard M. Urbina.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Quite a
well,
name.
it could be a girl's name.
Very, yeah. That's a podcast. That's like a character in a podcast series name. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't. I've only listened to our podcast.
Anyway,
the past
so
year and
he
a half.
issues a 90-page opinion, which is pretty rare for a judge, because this is in a pretrial state, and it makes it very difficult to challenge on appeal. He says that the feds completely mishandled the case. It's in reckless violation of the defendant's constitutional rights. They say that the feds rely too much on the statements that they gave to the State Department when they were under the impression they had immunity. Remember that?
Well, that's just a coincidence.
Yeah. So it's a total fucking mess. At the same time, like I mentioned, remember when I mentioned that Blackwater was being accused of running guns throughout the Middle East?
Yes.
Okay, so at the same time, Blackwater is dealing with a grand jury in North Carolina investigating them for weapons smuggling and bribery of Iraqi officials.
Oh, yeah. And also, I should mention, I made all these notes about this. There's not enough time to get into it, and there's no really a place for it. They also ran guns in Afghanistan and signed them out of Afghani armories under the name Eric Cartman
Oh, come on, man.
from South Park, yes. Which, who knows? Maybe he's in Blackwater. I don't know. He seems, is a little fat for that.
You
but,
know, little details like that are so funny. Fuck, I wish I could think of another one off the top of my head.
I mean,
but,
wait till we get to the Libya weapon smuggling thing because it gets even funnier.
but it's like little details like that really give you a window into like how human and like obscene the like state
Yeah.
apparatus is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're like, you guys are fucking quoting South Park on your fucking killing sprees.
While you're taking like 200 AK-47s that the Afghan National Police have and then giving them to Taliban or whatever, or to probably to ISIS.
Sick.
Or just selling them, who knows?
Mercenaries, they're just like you. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the judge throws out the first trial. This is a total disaster. It's not just a disaster for DOJ, but it's like actually a diplomatic disaster, because remember how I mentioned that, the Iraqi government really was like seizing on this as a way to kind of like drum up domestic support too, because surprise, surprise, it was quite popular at the time to run on anti-American sentiment in Iraq.
Yeah, and even as a lot of these guys sort of in private sort of kowtowed to the Americans, in public they were very, loud in their opposition to basically any lack of any accountability to these Blackwater guards.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing is that you can, they'll be very anti-American to the public, but the whole time they're communicating with the Obama administration. And that's the thing.
Exactly.
So, State Department cables show that the State Department communicated to DOJ directly that this case was having a significant impact on diplomatic and political issues, like with Iraq. And Eric Holder, I mean, it's alleged that Eric Holder had direct discussions with then Prime Minister Maliki in Iraq, which is pretty crazy. Funny enough, the right wing in their appeals process has started... This is just a funny detail. I'm sorry, you guys. They've started calling, instead of, we mentioned Raven 23, which was like the unit, the Blackwater unit. They've started calling them the Biden 4.
Incredible.
Which has got to be some harebrained Bannonite scheme to like attach this to the incoming Biden administration. It's just so funny. They're doing that because Biden, 3 weeks after this case gets dropped, Biden, shows up in Iraq and promises that the Obama administration is going to deliver a win to the Iraqi people on their case against Blackwater.
Smart move.
Yeah. So anyway, second case comes April 2011. An appellate court says, actually, no, the 2009 decision is wrong, and you can actually go back and continue your prosecution of these guys. Right?
Love an appellate court. Yeah.
Yeah. So they prosecute 4 of the guys. They drop charges on one of them. The trial begins June 2014. There's 10 weeks of testimony, 28 days of jury deliberations, convictions, all 4 men. Slatton, the main guy that we mentioned, he gets sentenced in April 2015, life in prison.
Mm-hmm.
The other 3 get 30 years in prison each. But the story doesn't end there. August 2017, a U.S. appeals court overturns Slatton's murder conviction and says, no, it's not fair. This guy was so psycho. You shouldn't have tried him with the other 3.
Ah.
So then they say, this guy's got to get another retrial. It's like a fucking disaster.
You can do that? If you're just too crazy, they'll be like, oh, no, man, he makes
I don't think they actually said he was psycho. I'm adding a little color commentary. But anyway, so then they have to run another trial. They have to run this guy again. Murder on his own. They declare a mistrial. They got to do a third trial.
Christ.
So this guy gets tried. I swear to God, this guy gets tried 3 times.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's like so fucking nuts. So then November 2018, two years into Trump's presidency. That's how fucking recent this shit is, right? November 2018, they get their 3rd attempt. They finally convict him for murder December 19th, 2018. And now they're all out.
Yeah. Now they've just all been pardoned across the board. In interviews I've read with them, they seem totally unremorseful for what they've done. Which
yeah, I mean,
totally par for the course.
It's hard to convey the total darkness in which these guys operate. Like, yeah. It's hard. I mean, we're just doing a podcast. It's hard without video, without all this archival stuff, for people to fully appreciate like how fucking insane these guys are and how insane what was happening in Iraq was.
I mean, it was like, especially the thing with Blackwater. I mean, we all know that how brutal U.S. troops were in Iraq, and kicking in doors and tying up families and shooting people and all that stuff. But with Blackwater, it's almost to another level, because when you're in the Army or you're in the Marines, you're in whatever, there are like certain rules of engagement. There's a bureaucracy, there's a chain of command, and there's this kind of like apparatus around you. But with Blackwater, a lot of these guys had formerly served in the military, and now they're sort of free to be the cowboys that they want to be. Because, I've known, people I went to high school with, people I knew later in life had served in the army, and like one gripe that a lot of people have, not necessarily these guys, but a lot of people have, is that they're not allowed to do a lot of stuff. And in Blackwater, you sort of get the chance to become a cowboy. And where do cowboys operate? Cowboys operate the frontier, and at the frontier, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And it's like they did, and they could, and that's a totally foreseeable sort of byproduct of this is that you breed already. The U.S. military and it's this professional military breeds sort of these I don't even know what to call them, but just like class of like fucked up, brain damaged Praetorian warriors. And then you have this like special operations, which is a whole other thing. I didn't even talk about fucking Navy SEALs. We'll get into that next episode on this, because I got a lot to say about Navy SEALs. But then you get these Blackwater guys, and it's like you're free of all those rules. Like now, when you get a civilian that's giving you shit, instead of joking about killing him, you can put a gun to his head and fucking kill him, and nothing happens. And so it's like, yeah, this is an industry that is like built to make killing machines, and that's what they do. I mean, that's what the Army does, but these guys really perfect it because they are on all those constraints that you have in the Army. I mean, this is dark fucking stuff.
It's crazy too, because it's why we had to like tell the story of how Cheney and Bush and Rumsfeld and all these guys and all the guys behind him too, right? I mean, those are just the big names. Like birthed this entire and like pushed through this entire industry. Is like, they had to create these super soldiers in order to fucking expand and continue accumulating more and more and more wealth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they created these things. If you guys listen to the there's like I think it's in the third episode of this, or maybe the second episode of the Spider Network series we did with Michael Judge, where he's talking about the kind of strange relationship between the way that warfare, like insurgent warfare, responds to like the changes of the invading army or whatever. And we were talking about it in the case of Vietnam. And like, that's the same fucking case with what we've seen with the proliferation of PMCs in the Middle East and the way that and what happened with the occupation in Iraq. Like, this is going to be like 2 episodes in a row that I mentioned this, so sorry about that. But there's a scene in Twin Peaks: The Return. I know I keep going back to this, but it really, I mean, everyone should watch it. But it's there's this like really infamous sequence I think it's in the 8th episode, where it's like this full camera swan dive into the mushroom cloud of the Trinity nuclear test in like over the White Sands Missile Range. And like, for people who don't know, this is 1945, I think, and it's the first atomic bomb test in history. So this is before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's like the sequence in the show is like completely horrifying and beautiful at the same time, and it's supposed to be, right? And there's, Lynch has Threnody of the victims of Hiroshima playing, which is a very kind of chaotic, insane, like cacophonous whirl of sound, and you're like swirling around this like ash cloud. It's an incredible sequence. And then the episode like cuts to 1958 New Mexico, and there's this like disgusting Lynchian creature that like hatches out of this egg in the desert, and it like crawls out of the explosion site, and it ends up like crawling through a window into the mouth of this like sleeping child, this little girl. And it's strongly implied in the series that it's funny, we started this episode railing on podcasts about TV shows, and I'm talking about TV show. I was going to make a joke,
but now you have to.
Well, okay, anyway. But so it's strongly implied in the series that this little girl is like one of the central evils that's birthed, like in this Twin Peaks American, like kind of, very 1950s American world that Lynch creates. That this is like the central like cosmic evil in the Twin Peaks universe. So it's like a bit of an origin tale. And it seems like what Lynch is really getting at, and I think this is kind of like a thread through most of his work. But that with the explosion of the atom bomb, like a Rubicon was crossed, right? And this inexplicable evil was like unleashed on the world with the creation of this. And like even before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which it should be said are like the most horrific acts, some of the most horrific acts, if not the most horrific acts in human history. But that something changed when this happened, and that like kind of dialectically this new evil was born out of it, right?
Yeah.
And you see in Iraq, like basically what I'm trying to get at is like, you know, to bring it all around is like, it's not a coincidence that ISIS, which yeah, we all make jokes about and whatever, but like, you know, is one of the most like evil, nihilistic death cults ever to exist in history. It's hard for me to find the words to, I think almost by design, it's difficult to describe like how all-consuming and dark and a void like ISIS is.
I quite like them, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
I mean, they want to make like I don't think people understand. Like, they want to make nothing exist, like including themselves.
Yeah,
it's like the pure ideology of a school shooter. It's like something I can't wrap my head around. You know,
I was always just astounded. Like, you know, we go through bodies and like, you know, they'd all have these fucking explosives strapped to them, and it's like I would always think every time I looked at one of these, I'm like, there is basically nothing you could tell me that would make me put explosives around my body, even if I was going to fight, you know, and like, you know, was supposed to blow them up when I got wounded. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's all of it like that. That's what sort of made it so like effective, because, you know, they any way is oblivion for them. You know, if they
exactly.
get you, they can annihilate you. If they die, then
it's like a pure death drive, like a pure annihilation of all existence.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about like ruling over everyone. It's about just like fucking consuming everything into a void. And it's like a darkness that like won't stop coming.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to say is like, I don't think it's a fucking coincidence that gets born out of the horrors of what the United States, and specifically what we hired these fucking mercenary killers to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, we had this engorged belly full of people out there, and like, you know, that's the shit out, you know, and gave weapons to. But yeah, no, absolutely. It's all of this stuff. I mean, Prince himself is and the sort of the reinvention of Eric Prince and what happened to him after sort of his fall, after Blackwater cut ties with him and changed its name. I think that actually perfectly mirrors that. It's all comes from the same miasma. Like it all kind of crawls out of the same depths, out of the same well. And it's all just like, it's, you know, it's evil. And it's a continuation, like you said, or like, you know, we were talking about the Spider Network episode, like this stuff was like birthed in sort of the post-World War II environment. And then it kind of, you know, it gains steam and it, you know, it gets further along. And then now we're here today where it's like, it's somewhat the same, but not completely recognizable. It's like a new thing. It's a dialectical. Excuse me. Let me take that again. Yeah, it's a dialectical relationship, like you said. Like we're at, I don't know, a new version of this, and for the new century.
So we had planned initially for this to be one episode, but here's the thing. There's too much to talk about.
We got like halfway through the notes. We're not even, I mean, it's
just
almost
like, you know, I'm sure I hope this wasn't repeating too much for people, but it's hard to kind of like lay the scene for talking about who Eric Prince is and like what he's up to right now, which is what the next episode will be about, without kind of talking about this history with Blackwater and, I mean, specifically with the Iraq War, because it really does mark a shift in the way that America, you know, was running the empire.
Yeah, exactly. I think with what Prince is doing now, I mean, we live in a pretty different world than we lived in 2007. And with what he's doing now, it's just so psycho, but so actually like wrapped in with the world system that we have to lay that groundwork to show where this came from. And, I remember when I was a kid, hearing about Halliburton and Cheney and all these fucking people. But like, I also got to remember, I'm 44 years old now. A lot of people might not remember that. I fought in Iraq the first time. The movie
You
Jarhead,
have Gulf War syndrome.
I knew Jarhead from Jarhead, the movie.
What was that one about?
Jarhead.
Is that supposed to be the good Iraq War movie? Are there any good Iraq War movies?
I saw Jarhead. The only scene I remember from it is when they put in a videotape and the guy has his wife getting fucked on it. Spoiler alert.
I gotta say, people don't like American Sniper. I think, this is the second episode I'm going to bat for fucking Clint Eastwood. But here's the thing. It really is an all-American portrait of that time period.
I've seen a scene from it where he's like on the phone with his wife and gets into a firefight with like the badass sniper in Iraq. They should just put out like an art movie about him on the top of the stadium in New Orleans, just shooting down 17-year-olds.
Yeah, we got to talk about Blackwater. Remind me to mention Blackwater and Katrina next episode so we can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
But I think too, it's like people want Iraq War movies that are like critical of the Iraq War. They're like, "Ooh, we want to watch like the Le Epic Bacon Takedown." Or whatever. But it's like actually way more artistically fascinating and interesting to watch something like of the time, of the culture, like something actually explicitly American, which is why Clint Eastwood is so fucking good.
Yeah, or Secret Soldiers of Benghazi.
I feel
it's so funny that American Sniper got killed by a mentally ill veteran at a gun range. I'm sorry, like, okay, I mean, it's perfect. It's perfect. If he was, what other way is for that guy to die?
At a Creed
the guy who
show.
shot him should be given a medal at a Creed. Yeah, okay, true.
Crowd surfing at a Creed show.
In a pit, yeah.
What happened to them? Wait, did that guy die?
I'm not familiar.
Or did he
what
get
guy
sober?
Is it?
Or was he always sober?
I think you're thinking of the Nickelback guy.
I can't remember.
I don't know.
That was a crazy time.
I assume
for
he was
American
always
culture.
sober because what was Creed's big song? With Arms Wide Open. That did get sober. That guy did get sober.
Isn't that about getting sober?
No, that's probably about God.
Or is it about getting high? Getting higher?
I would probably about God. It's
Wild
but maybe
time.
not.
Everyone was wearing cargo pants.
Not me. I was wearing skinny jeans, and all the kids at school made
that
fun
was-
of me. And now look at them. Look at them. Fuck you. Now I'm wearing big ass pants with a bunch of pockets and fucking polo shirts. And now you're wearing fucking tight jeans. Fuck you. Suck my fucking dick. Fuck you. I won.
I'm Liz.
My name is Brace. We are joined, of course, by producer Young Chomsky.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein.